Welcome to episode 16 of 5D Tea Time. I'm your co-host, Krystal Kristen, with
Lindsay Love.
Yeah, we're so grateful to be here today. There's a lot happening in life right now for Lindsay and I, and I'm sure for many of you. And there's just a sense that, like, thank goodness I have this 5D tea time right now to just make a cup of tea in the middle of it all and just sit and reflect and connect and just be in the simplicity of communicating with a dear friend and to all of you.
Mm.
So, tea time cheers to you all for being here. If you haven't made that cup of tea, what does yours say?
Oh, let that shit go.
I love it. I love it.
Actually kind of appropriate for me anyway. It's like,
It's the
oh, I
perfect
feel a
cup.
certain way, just let that shit go. That's actually why I chose it this morning. What's yours got on it? There's a cardinal on there, isn't it?
Cardinal, yeah.
Yeah, and the winter sky.
Cardinals are kind of symbols when, a dear one in your life is passed to the other side. When a cardinal comes, it's a messenger from that person, that they're with you and all is well and life continues on in beautiful, magical ways. So yeah, cardinal.
I love that you said that because I always associate them with my grandmother. So when I see them, I always think of her and I'm like, oh, there she, yeah, there's her spirit. But that's cool. I didn't know just in general. So that makes a lot of sense because they do tend to show up after someone's passed, it seems, like in funny ways.
Yeah. And sometimes I see cardinals because they're in the habitat here in Indiana, and it doesn't feel so significant, but sometimes those cardinals come up close in like ways that it's like, oh, they are connecting with me right now. I'm like, hi, Dad. Like I can feel it when it's like really, really wanting to connect, or like the spirits wanting to connect through that cardinal. Like there's more of a substance to the sighting, or it's more than just a sighting. It's like becomes a message. um
I love that. I just want to say, we see animals all the time, right? And it sometimes it doesn't mean much, like, oh, an animal crosses in front of the road in front of me, but there are moments where, yes, there are unique interactions with an animal or something that catches my eye or connects me to them. And I always go to the Native American totems. Like I look them up online and the totem, and then there's always like a significant meaning for that special animal and like the message that it's bringing. And I tell you, 100% of the time, it is spot on of exactly what I need to hear in that moment.
yeah. Isn't that incredible?
Mm, yeah, I just love it. Sorry, I had to share that piece.
I just love that. No, the nature, the animal spirits, the plant spirits, the animal spirits, the animal totem specifically is just they're so here to support us, and or spirit so here to support us and communicates through the nature spirits. And that's our family. Our family is this planet. And I feel like, oh, the birds and even the pollinators and, just the fox that's hanging out in this neighborhood. I'm like, oh, this is my family. I mean, I might not see the fox, but like, my energy and, the habitat I'm creating, the ecosystem I'm creating, physically in my yard, but also spiritually, energetically, emotionally, mentally, this atmosphere that I'm emitting. It's like, I'm communicating with my family. It sounds maybe wild, but it feels that way. I feel like, oh, I'm a steward, I'm a guardian, I'm caretaking life, as these
Your
days.
yard is exactly like
Oh
I
yeah,
remember when I lived at your house. And someone called me a Disney princess. I can't remember who it was, because I would always send them photos of the backyard. I would be sitting on the deck and there would be 3 deer bedded down in your yard, and then like a squirrel frolicking and a rabbit, and then, a hawk in the tree or whatever. I mean, everything came to visit your yard. I remember even one night, Joni and I had dinner and we were sitting on the back porch and an albino skunk came through the backyard. I mean, literally right next to the deck. I was like, Joni, don't move. She was so freaked out. But anyhow, yeah, there's some kind of magic in your yard. I mean, you've created that environment and welcomed that ecosystem in, and you can tell by the animals' interactions, they just feel super comfortable.
Yeah.
Like, oh, that's the yard that I'm gonna go bed down and relax in.
This yard specifically. Well, and I'm living in, a forest neighborhood. I mean, we're kind of in a forest city here, and I'm in a park neighborhood. So, there is this kind of collective mentality of just loving these animals, taking
Yeah,
care of them, planting, food for them. And a lot of people have bird feeders or plants that actually, feed the ecosystem. There's a lot of
that's true.
consciousness
Yeah.
around that, which I value so much. I mean, that's such a congruent value that I share with this particular location. Other values, maybe not so much, but that value for sure, we're like totally synchronized. So
I love that. Yeah. Yeah, that is true. There's a lot of people who love and respect the earth and the creatures upon it as well in your
yeah,
neighborhood. Hmm.
yeah. Yeah, it's so important. Our environments that we choose, and like Lindsay and I were talking before we got on, just this kind of state of like anxiety and overwhelm when like big steps are being taken in life. And we've talked about this in previous episodes, and like how to mm, just almost like it's almost to be, I don't want to say expected, like we should expect overwhelm whenever we make big decisions and step through those decisions into action or put those decisions into action. Yet it is seemingly a part of the formula that there are
Hmm.
going to be stages that we're going to bump up against growing pains, and those growing pains are like embedded in our nervous system. They're embedded in kind of like fear-based trauma, shock of just being a human and alive here in this world, and whatever narrative we grew up with, that imprinted our nervous system. So I'm just curious, like, we're talking about just the sanctuaries, like true
Hmm.
sanctuaries, having sanctuary to rest in. Um, and if you don't have that physical environment necessarily in the backyard, like, just perceiving rest as like a cup of tea, but I'm curious, Lindsay, like, as your nervous system gets anxious and wound up, as you're in motion to take the step forward in your life, um, yeah, what is rest? What kind of rest are you craving right now, or in general, when you're feeling that anxious and overwhelmed?
Well, I love that you said sanctuary, and I'll circle back around to that, because that I think is so huge, to have a respite from the world. Because as we all know, the world can be so wonderful and beautiful, but also it can be overwhelming as well. So having that space to go to, it doesn't have to be big, or maybe it's just a space in your mind, created in your mind, but a physical sanctuary space is such a beautiful thing. As I prepare, and as fear for me right now is kind of manifesting a bit as anxiety, which in turn shifts into overwhelm. And I find that I'm not as like efficient and effective. I'm not as clear with my thinking. I'm kind of just a little bit dazed and confused in a way. And so for me, yoga is a huge one. I mean, getting on my mat, even for 5 minutes, just here at the house, or going to a class is even better. Um, because that forces me to shift my energy, to shift my thinking, but it also shifts my environment. So I find that if I'm like caught in like the non-clarity, overwhelm, kind of anxiety, if I can't shift my thinking very well or shift my energy, it helps so much to change the environment, to go speak with a friend or to go to a yoga class. Or recently I've been going to the sauna, which has been amazing, and sitting in there for 25 minutes or 20 minutes and doing a meditation. But shifting the environment is huge. And I will also say that when I've gone through really big chapters of my life, like really big things that have kind of left me a little lost or overwhelmed, um, for me, going traveling, so shifting my environment is massive. And that is just personal experience. But going to another place, exploring, is 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 so, so, so important for me.
Mhm. Mhm. So small and big ways to shift the mental environment. Like you said, you can go to some place in your mind, like a mental holiday, but actually
Mhm.
is shifting the physical environment is so huge. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Even just like getting out, taking a walk. Sometimes when we just kind of are dazed and confused, or maybe over micromanaging things to create order when really you're just feeling anxious and chaos, like nothing is efficient. It seems like nothing's getting done. You're just kind of spinning your wheels. Just
Mhm.
it's almost like a trauma response in a sense. It's like kind of over obsessing about things. It's like, oh, changing the landscape. I think you're spot on about that. Super spot on.
Yeah. So, Kristen asked me today because I was feeling a little bit overwhelmed in my energy. And she was like, do you still want to do 5D tea time? And like, yes, this is the perfect thing to shift
Mhm.
the energy, to bring me back to like a center point, because I was a little bit caught in like, exactly like you were saying, like spinning my wheels, but not really accomplishing anything, just kind of doing to doing, but feeling unclear and a little bit heady, like dazed and confused a little. So even something like this, like you were saying, making a cup of tea, but sitting down with a friend and having a conversation about it
Yeah.
is huge. Or not talking about it at all, talking about something entirely different.
Yeah. Yeah, because yeah, I followed years ago this guru, and he initiated me into a kriya, a breath kriya. It's very very powerful and really, oh my gosh, talk about head shift. I mean, it shifted the chemistry of my brain. And back in my early 20s, maybe 19 or 20, when I was initiated into this kriya, which, yeah, the power of yogic practices for head changing is huge. But he was speaking on the topic of rest, and how, sometimes we think, oh, like rest, I just need to sleep, I just need to sleep. And it's like, well, so rest can be that. I mean, if you're just really exhausted and you need to get horizontal, or maybe you just need to get horizontal and not sleep. Maybe you just need the circulation to come out of your ankles, and or to the swelling to come out of the ankles, and a few minutes of rest, lying down in your back just to recirculate the system. But rest can be so many different things. It doesn't have to be sleep. It can be just these recharge moments, like hitting the recharge button. Um, like Lindsay said, like making a cup of tea, just taking a few minutes to pause. That rest might be taking a walk, or that rest might be just going to grab water and just sitting with that water and being with that water. Rest might be just shifting your gaze to another focal point and just, it's like resetting the nervous system. So when the nervous system's starting to sympathetic overdrive, I mean, we need our sympathetic system to drive, to like be motivated and take action. So, but when it's kind of in a trauma loop, which is that overdoing of fighting time. You're getting anxious in time. You're like, I gotta do, I gotta do, I gotta do. And then like nothing's really happening, but you're just really busy doing nothing, basically. A lot of important things, but really it's nothing, Um, it's like, okay, sympathetic nervous system is out of whack. It's way in overdrive. So like shifting the focus. It's like it's rest, dropping into parasympathetic. Maybe it's just like it's kind of like a stop, drop, and roll thing. Like I'm in overdrive. Like
On fire.
I'm on fire. Yeah, like I am burning my adrenals out right now. And um like stop, drop, and roll. I mean, maybe literally. Like I don't know, that might really help the sympathetic to drop in. And legs up the wall pose in yoga. Oh, that's so good for connecting the parasympathetic and getting the lymphatic to drain. Yeah, but rest doesn't equal sleep. It can just equal mode shift. What do you have anything to say? Or does that like spawn anything for you?
No, I just love this idea of, yeah, the parasympathetic is like this rest and heal, space. And then, yes, like you were saying, the sympathetic is so necessary, but the hormone release from the sympathetic can be also quite taxing on the system. I can feel it, like you were saying, the adrenals, and then the cortisol is, and it's just adding fuel to the fire in a way, that like hormone release. So that's why it becomes almost like a spiral, because and it's interesting because some people can become addicted to that kind of like lifestyle, and it's almost like addicted to the hormone release that happens with drama or stress or anxiety, and we can get caught in those cycles, right, of like running purely on cortisol and adrenaline, and in our society, it's not an abnormal thing to be kind of locked into the sympathetic nervous system, and rarely fully activating the parasympathetic, especially during waking hours, because we tend to be a very achievement based society, but a lot of that achievement is backed by a lot of go. We got to go here, we got to go there, I gotta get this done. And so we continually operate in the sympathetic during that time, and that's a constant flight, fight, or freeze. And so the body, yeah, it's just interesting, like the body can only handle so much of that for so long until it crashes, basically. So it's like here and then bam, or it's like hitting a tree. So I love this idea of like, yes, sleep is great, but how can we rest? And more so, when we rest, how can we access that parasympathetic?
Mhm.
How can we really rest? Because if we grab a cup of tea, but then the mind is still going, even though we're doing the physical actions of creating the space, the body's still in the sympathetic, right? Because the mind is fueling that fire still. So it's really, I would say the best way to access it, of course, is the breath. But then it also becomes about a control of the mind,
Mhm.
to really get into that parasympathetic space. Because even if you're in a stressful situation, but you can control the mind and the breathing, you can trick the body into being in the parasympathetic. Easier said than done, I will say that. But there are different breath techniques and things that can help us to access those things. So yeah, I went off on a weird tangent, but yeah, I think the whole idea of rest is to, whatever that looks like, is to access the parasympathetic somehow, some way,
Yeah.
really get the
To
rest that we're
remember,
longing for.
it's a choice. Yeah. There's a choice point there.
Mm. What do you mean by that? Can you elaborate?
Well, just that when we're in overdrive, we forget that there's there's other options other than what's being hyper focused upon.
Mm.
And that hyper focusing makes the moment so acute that it seems like that's all that there is.
Yeah,
And
that's
right?
such a good way to describe it. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah. It's just this hyper acute focus, which has its place too. Yet whenever you feel that first signal of overdrive and you don't respond to it, and then you just push through it, and then there's another signal of overdrive, you don't listen to it, by the third or 3000th signal, you're going to go into sympathetic. I mean, you're already probably in sympathetic overload, but you're going to completely crash into parasympathetic collapse where you're just exhausted and you're
Mm.
actually not functional at that stage.
Mm.
So whenever you over drive and don't listen to the signals, then you don't even get to access parasympathetic. You just drop off the radar and you're exhausted. And then it takes a lot more to get the energy. Well, then you need the coffee to get going,
Or the
and
sugar. Yeah.
the sugar or whatever it is to like get that energy back, right? So like the system actually has no regulation in the middle. I'm in a training all about this. So we're working with this deeply and working with the subconscious programming that is keeping us in sympathetic overwhelm or parasympathetic collapse.
Mm.
and and what we're really talking about here is that yummy middle where the hormones in the body is functioning in an optimal inner sustained way where there's
Mm.
calibration and balance and there's that feeling of you know excitement and productivity in like a healthy way. And then when we start to feel like I'm about to go into overwhelm, catching it. And
Right.
like, what does the body need there? Oh, it needs to get up and do some squats to like move some of that energy. Like, great. And then, okay, then come back to my seat. Like, I'm ready. But like, becoming mindful of the nervous system and what's happening inside of us
Mhm.
and giving the system what it needs for inner sustainability long term. We're talking about like endurance training with these techniques that we're talking about, just like kind of that stop drop and roll kind of thing. Like this is like talking about like the longevity and quality of vitality in the nervous system and in the physical body. Yeah, quality of life. uh yeah, it's what we're, I think, cueing here is just catching the first wave of signals and loving yourself enough to respond to that. And it's a practice. It's a practice. It's like communicating with ourselves very intimately and like really listening to what the biofeedback of the system is telling us. And then like we collapse. Of course, there's we get out of balance and then we hopefully have a good friend we can dial up or like have that yoga practice or some of these things installed in our life. If you don't have them installed in your life, start installing healthy anchor points for you to check in with yourself. Like really intend to develop that quality inside of your structure of life.
Mhm.
I got a little teachy there, maybe. I'm like in teach mode with the online retreat this week. But that's just what's coming through. Yeah.
Yeah, the thing that just keeps coming up for me is just working with the mind, because that's where we do have that choice point, and the mind is can be a powerful tool, or it can really consume us and kind of take control, right? It's kind of how I see AI a little bit,
Mhm.
or technology, like the mind is beautiful, technology is beautiful. It can bring us so many wonderful things and connections, but it can also like just take control completely. It has the potential to completely just take over. And the mind, when it takes over and it's in a negative mind space, it can it immediately affects the body, the physical body, right? The nervous system, the hormone production, all of it. And so the more we have awareness around it, and I really shouldn't compare the mind to AI, but it's
Oh, I
in a
think it's
way
good.
like there is the potentiality for it to just really like put us into this deep dark space. And I see that with AI as well. Like there's such beautiful things that can come of it, but then there's a lot of like kind of potentialities that exist out here that could be quite negative and deep and dark. Um, so so the more that we have the signaling, like you were saying, the awareness, and then the more tools that we have, just the yoga, like you're saying, the breath, all these things, those are the two places to start, and then working with those tools to start to shift it. But if we don't have awareness around the mind, that's when the spiraling starts to begin, and can really, yeah, wreak havoc, not only on the mind, but the whole entire system. And that can eventuate into dis-ease in the body, continually being in a state of overwhelm, in a state of anxiety, in a state of, really living in the sympathetic nervous system, living in the flight or fight, freeze. That lion is chasing me, living in that place. And that is very unnatural and not sustainable, yes, long term for health and
For
well-being.
the individual health and well-being, and for the planetary health and well-being, because
Mm.
this sympathetic overdrive thing that's going on is chomping up our planet.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Can
and
you elaborate on that too? Because I completely agree.
yeah, let's check our time. Yeah. So, I mean, there's this sense that when there is that overdrive and we are in, it's a lower mind function. It's actually a reptilian mind function.
Mhm.
It's the reptilian brain.
Yeah.
And it doesn't necessarily have empathy. There's not a lot of empathy in that energy. When we like come into self-love, we're coming into the higher mind energy. We're coming into more of the higher self energy, but we stay in the operating function of the lower mind reptilian brain. It's very enmeshed and interlinked in the apparatus of the ego. The ego wants what it wants, and
Mm.
it only sees that, and it seeks to fulfill the desire that it has for its insatiable appetite.
Mhm.
And so, in that sense, in this sympathetic overdrive, this overadrenalized state, there aren't these hormones that have the space to be produced, that like oxytocin, vasopressin, these hormones that connect us and that bond us through the heart. Um, we don't have access to them whenever we're overdriving. So we can't even experience them personally. We don't even know how to really deeply connect with ourselves in a loving way, or the outer environment, or even to perceive the environment as a part of us as an interconnected, interrelational being. It's just what I want, what I need, and what I desire, and that's and then that desire, it's a
Mm,
fire that's out of control. You're not only burning the adrenal, the fire, creating an inner burnout. Um, it's a misuse of fire, or like the element of fire, and then that not only consumes your own being, but it starts consuming the beings around you and the planet around you and your relationships around you, and just saying, like, you as in like the general scope of this kind of human nature psychology that's like connected to the reptilian brain, because we're moving into like the super nature, the supernatural human being. We're moving more into, in that parasympathetic, sympathetic balance connection. We're moving more into the supernatural human being, rather than this like human nature that is all in these like primal animal reptilian instincts that just are in this like consumptive, insatiable appetite kind of mentality, that are kind of competing against itself, competing against nature. It's like survival of the fittest, which is a war-based mentality. And I really, the Darwinian, that's damaging. Actually, it's a pretty damaging mentality, that the wars of the 1900s and continue on today. I mean, it's ingrained in the human psyche now, this like survival of the fittest thing. And it's yeah, it puts like the stage of like Hunger Games. I've never seen those movies, but like just the feeling of Hunger Games.
mhm.
Like like may the one with the most power rise, and you know
Yeah.
uh I don't even know what you asked to like probe that, but you asked me, what do you mean by, like,
Well, I asked you, what do you mean by how does it influence the planet? And that was a beautiful description, because it's like it does become this very ego-based, egocentric, me kind of way of operating. And it's not intentional, I would say, but
no,
there's lack of empathy, because all one can see is oneself
yeah,
at that time, and whatever is going on in the mind, and how do I satiate that hunger of my mind, or how do I control it, or how do I get what I desire, or how do I shift? Yeah, how yeah, it's a very um self-based way of operating,
the
and if
lower
you're
self.
always existing in that energy, it
Mhm.
then that energy influences, like you said, everyone, not only around us, but um, the planet as well, and all of the beings on it.
Well, and every human's almost like hooked into this like meta thing, because that's what society's doing. So you just kind of plug into that. So you're like, I have to survive this, you know? So it's like we're almost like just auto hooked into it.
Mm.
It takes a lot of yoga and meditation and breath work and like consciousness practices to experience that, whoa, we are so much more than that. Like, we are not just like a little pawn in this game. I was even thinking about Pac-Man the other day, like how fun Pac-Man was as a kid. What do they do? They're just chomping bits. It's like programming to just chomp bits.
Yeah, exactly. Get more, get more, get more, get more, get more. There's the orange over there. Get the
Oh,
orange.
there's a
Okay, no,
ghost.
run away from the people. Get more, get more, get more. Run away from the other.
It's
Oh my God, that's so funny. I used to always play it at the pizza place. Yeah,
true.
exactly. It's chomping bits, chomping
Paco's
at the bit.
Pizza. You remember Paco's Pizza in
Yeah,
Jasper?
that's
Yeah,
it.
that's that's where
Exactly
they
where I
had the
would play.
Pac-Man.
Always at the pizza place. Yeah. And then at Mario's Pizza, I would play this pinball baseball game where you could win baseball cards.
You were a good softball player. Such a good
Oh,
softball
that
player.
was so fun. You were a good softball player too. You were a really good volleyball player.
It was okay. It was just,
Oh,
I had fun though. It was fun. My memories of all that are fun times for
oh,
sure.
you were a good, amazing gymnast. Okay, well, we won't go into all of it. I forgot about that part. Like almost an Olympic gymnast.
Mm. Yeah, so it's definitely um an act of service to actually give yourself time
Mm,
to, like, it's an act of service to give ourselves time because we're not participating in the karmic, just the mess of the world. We like decide that we are a choice. Actually, I don't have to feed that beast of
mhm,
this adrenaline just pumping through the planet. It's like, oh, I'm going to connect in with self-love and like empathy and like compassion, and you can see all that with like such compassion because we were hooked into it, or parts of ourselves are hooked into it, but it's like, oh, like, then you can just get free in your space and you don't have to contribute to that mess.
mhm,
And I mean, it becomes acts of self-love. Taking space, taking time out are acts of service, I do feel, to the collective, and the collective being, the nature, and
mhm.
just the energy field that we're responsible.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that energy field, that electromagnetic field, and how, and the influence that like what radiates out from that, and the influence that it has. And it's so true. It's an act of service by creating acts of self-love, because what then a person is radiating
Mhm.
is much higher vibrationally, um, than the grind, than the chaos, than the constant sympathetic nervous system go, go, go. Yeah,
And
such
then
a
we
good
have
point.
like,
Such a good point. Oh my God, nailed it.
yeah, yeah, then we can actually be of service, like when someone's suffering in that space, be like, hey, check this out. Like, you can take a pause. It's good. And what's interesting, when you're in that overdrive, overwhelm, that mind tells you, oh, you're selfish to do that.
Mhm.
That's self.
Because that's what we were programmed to believe.
We're programmed
Yeah.
to believe that in that lower
Mhm.
ego reptilian mind.
Mhm.
No, no, no. Not true, not true, not true. It's an act of service to
Mhm.
take the pause and connect in. Yeah.
And manage your energy, manage your nervous system, manage your mind,
Mm-hmm.
because that's all we have control of.
Mm-hmm. 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 Choice. We have choice.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay, beautiful. Well, I feel complete for now. Do you feel
Complete as
complete?
well.
Okay.
Thank you. That was beautiful.
Mm, good. Yeah. Good little gear shift for both of us, and I hope for you all too. And be sure to pour that tea for these conversations and give yourself just a little, a moment of rest. Sometimes rest for me is doing my dishes. I know that sounds weird, but I like love doing my dishes and just cleaning my kitchen, listening to something or not listening to something. I'm just like, ooh, there's something about that. It's just like my moving meditation. Anyway, it can be anything. That's all I'm saying. Shifting the gear for rest. It's how we do it. It's not what we're doing, it's how we're doing it, really.
Yeah, so true.
Another piece. Okay, so much love to you all. Love you so much, Linz.
Love you so much. Thank you all for watching, listening. We appreciate you. Until
Yeah.
next time.
Like our video if you're
Yeah,
this far into
subscribe.
it.
Bye.
Bye.